Welcome to The Writer's Dream, a conversation with authors. Here, authors can talk about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. We have a lot of interesting information for the new writer and for the accomplished writer. You can find us on YouTube. Just look for The Writer's Dream, and we have a Facebook page, The Writer's Dream. Today's guest is Paula Groothuis, and Paula is the author of I'm Okay, Vocabulary Early History, and Peace in Our World. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, and we're glad to have you. So how did you come to write these books?
Well, rhyming started in my life as a teenager. When I wrote thank you notes, I felt like I wanted to make them more fun. So I started rhyming them. And then as a mom, when I was PTA president and my term was up, I thanked everyone in rhyme. And somebody called me right after that I didn't know very well and said she was going to a party. Could I rhyme something about this child? And she'd like to pay me. And I'm like, pay me to rhyme? So after that, I put an ad in the local penny saver. And I got a phone call from Newsday. And they wrote an article about this unusual business back in the 80s. And so that's how I started rhyming regularly for special occasions.
Well, how did you start rhyming in your own life? I mean, you obviously didn't just, at the end of this PTA term, come up with a rhyme. Where did the rhyming come from?
At a certain point in my life, I started rhyming my emotions. And, the changes in our lives and how we feel and how we want to have a better attitude. So I started rhyming that, and I actually took a class and self-published a book called A Clearer Reflection, Getting All My Emotions Out There. But then I went back to being a speech therapist when my children got a little older. I went back to work. And as a speech therapist, I came out with some rhyming thoughts, which I actually put on paper and printed them out. Mm-hmm. The first one was helping children who just had trouble expressing themselves and problems with social skills and their self-esteem because they had special needs. And it was called I'm Okay.
So, but your first book was A
Clearer Reflection.
Clearer Reflection.
Yes.
Easy for you to say. So, but tell me about that. Tell me about how that was involved in rhyming.
It has, I don't even remember, I have to look at it, but it has many, many rhymes in it about my view of life when I was younger, and then how the pain whatever pain I went through, and then, how I was moving towards enjoying myself, living in the present moment, and making things better. And it was fun. I had a book signing at my home and invited everyone I knew, and it was an exciting thing.
So do you think that using a book, let's say, to kind of crystallize your life philosophy, do you think that helped you when you went into speech therapy?
I think I was basically a happier person. And I'm thinking about doing one called The Same You, A Different View, and following up on that book one day. And that, of course, is for adults.
Okay, sure. But I'm thinking in terms of, in order to write, I think, this is just my opinion, in order to write books that help kids, you really have to have a clear idea of what your focus is in life, what you want to accomplish, and who you are. And that's what I'm getting from you, is that you went into speech pathology. What kind of kids did you deal with in speech?
I was in an elementary school, kindergarten through 6th grade, and all different kinds of things we worked on. Sometimes it was articulation, just the sounds. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it was children who were diagnosed with ADHD, with autism. Sometimes it was children who just seemed to have some special needs without a specific diagnosis. But in general, the idea of making them happier is really what motivated me to put I'm Okay together. Also, the beginning of the book is all about different activities that children can do. And I felt that promoted conversation about what they love to do and what they enjoy.
Well, that's a real gift, to be able to enable them to articulate. I mean, speech is so much a part of human communication. So the first book was Vocabulary, Early History?
Actually, the first book was I'm Okay,
Oh,
was the self-esteem.
okay.
And the whole message inside was, as much fun as it was to talk about all these things we love to do, that it's not what we do, it's who we are inside that makes us, who we are.
Do you have that book with you there? Do you have I'm Okay there?
I only have one copy left, and it's over there.
Oh, okay, all righty. So then, once you build on the self-esteem, then the vocabulary came next?
Yes. Oh, I also just wanted to mention that I read it to them from a paper version that I printed out. And one day I was in an exercise class, and a woman was selling her books. And so I asked her about getting published, and she said she was self-published by a company called Legwork. And then I called them, and that's how I ended up with my idea looking like a real book. And that was a very exciting time
Well,
for me.
we are really becoming a force, us self-published people, aren't we? Tell me something, if I were one of your kids, tell me something that I could do to improve my self-esteem. I'm not feeling too strong today. Tell me something I could do to improve my self-esteem.
Well, it was, enjoying what you do, think about what you love, not let others
I hate school.
affect you. Oh, I would ask you questions about, what do you hate about school, and try
I
to...
hate my teacher.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that it affects you that way, and we would have
She's
a
always picking on me.
discussion. Oh, what kinds of things is she saying to you?
I get up to sharpen my pencil in the middle of what she's, a lesson because I'm bored. I want to eat my lunch. I'm hungry, so I start rattling things in my desk. I don't know why she's so annoyed at that.
Well, I guess, sometimes making noise could affect other children, but you have to just, know that you're okay. And, you have to feel fine inside, and that you're doing what you need to do.
She
for
makes me
yourself.
stay after school.
Well, maybe we need to get together and have a conversation with her and work this out together.
What should I say to her?
I would go up to her and ask her, if you can sit down together and have a talk about, what's been bothering you.
Do you think she likes me?
I'm sure that she, likes her whole class, and she likes you too. And she wouldn't be correcting you if she didn't care about you. So I think she does.
So tell us about vocabulary, early history.
So
Sorry, I did that.
many of the children.
It was fun though.
Many of the children that I worked with, we really did need to work on increasing their vocabulary. So I got this idea, and again, I started it with a paper version, but then worked it into a book. And it starts out, when you were born some years ago, not one single word did you know. So we talk about the fact, because, children don't really think about that. And then the book goes through to talk about that you watched everybody else around as you heard sound after sound. And it wasn't as if you were shy. When you were hungry, you'd start to cry. You didn't know, one word yet. And then when I go on to say, when you were a few months old, you began to babble, you were told. In your crib, you would lay, goo goo gaga, you would say. And most of the kids laugh at that point. And then another page, I go, Mama, Dada, Boo Boo, hi. You waved your hand and called out, bye bye. And then I say to them, how many words were in your vocabulary? Really trying to give the children the concept of what it is to learn new words. And in the book, there are one or two words that they probably didn't know. So we would talk about them and say, if you remember that word, your vocabulary just got bigger, right. So that was the whole idea. And it ends by saying that that's what parents and teachers are for, and your vocabulary will grow with each new word you hear. You'll know 1 million words by the end of the year. And at the end of the book, there are learning ideas. so that you, as a parent or a teacher, have a real idea of what I'm trying to teach on each page?
This must be such a challenge in this era when kids are, my son has a stepson, and I've known him since he was 3 years old. Not my son, I knew him earlier, but Connor is his name. And, he's in the back seat, and in his, now it's a booster seat because he's 7, and he's watching a video. He's playing a game on his, whatever it is that he has, a junior iPad, iPad. And I'm thinking to myself, they don't talk. They don't talk anymore. So it's got to be a challenge to make kids more conversational and more verbal, because we as a society have become conversational in very short words, very limited vocabulary, and texting and things like that. So I can't imagine, because I know when my son was, this was, in the dark ages, we would sit around the dinner table and we would have a conversation. And his father was a journalist, so he had a vocabulary, and I was a teacher, so I had a vocabulary. And so what would you suggest to parents to get around this business of, I've seen teenagers sitting at the same dinner table texting each other, and they're sitting next to one another. So what can you suggest to get the kids off those devices?
As our children were growing up, we did put some restrictions on how much TV they were watching, and I feel that today, at dinner, the phones and the iPads and everything
there.
Shouldn't be there, so that we can communicate. As a speech therapist, I did not use a computer with the children, and in some schools that's very acceptable today. But
well, I think there's probably some programs that are very helpful.
Yes, that's true.
But you have to kind of lead by example, don't you? So yeah.
I always have the children, the homework right after the first time I read this book is to find out what the first word they learned was, and they come in and tell me, my first word was mommy, or my first word was cookie, or whatever their first word was.
That would be my first word. I read somewhere, or I probably saw it on PBS. I probably saw one of those Nova programs or one of those wonderful programs, that the babbling that children do is really, they're talking to you. And that when mothers who seem to instinctively speak to their children in sing-song, that is actually very acceptable to a child's brain, and that it somehow or other helps them to develop vocabulary. I don't know if that's true, but I thought that was very interesting.
Well, the children, if they're listening and processing, they're really taking it in and they're learning from it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the children that I worked with, it wasn't as easy for them.
Oh,
so,
sure. Yeah.
I even read this book. This book is very good for any kindergarten child, even 3-4 years old. You can read this book to children. But with children with special needs, sometimes it really went out to even 4th and 5th graders who, needed to understand what vocabulary is, what the word definition means, what it is to produce a whole sentence. All of those concepts are in the book, because that's, as teachers, what we want our children to be able to take it in more, to express it more, and to apply it to their writing as well. So it's...
And I like that you started with self-esteem, because I can't imagine that a child, once they get into school and they're in a peer group and they're different, they have to deal with that. No matter how careful the teachers and the adults are about creating a healthy environment, they need help creating some sort of self-esteem so that they can then say, I can do this, and to move on. So I like the way that you did that. And you must have been a nice speech therapist to work with.
I loved it, and I met children in kindergarten, and sometimes I ended up seeing them all the way to 6th grade, and so I had a very special relationship with them, and I saw their growth.
And I visit a lot of classrooms, and I really like the way the books look. They're, you visit a elementary school. I love to visit elementary school classrooms because I taught in a high school. And in high school, there was not a big emphasis on bulletin boards and classroom beauty, etc. And so it sometimes would get, I had a chemistry lab that I dealt with, so it could get pretty messy. But I go into an elementary school classroom, and they're so beautiful, the bulletin boards and the book displays and the displays of student work. I'm always very impressed. And these are really so attractive that I could imagine that the kids would really enjoy reading them. And the third book is Peace in Our World. Fourth book is Peace in Our World, right?
Yes.
So tell us about Peace in Our World.
Okay. And I also just want to share that in the school where I worked, because they know I rhyme, I actually did a rhyme for 9/11. And every year they read it on 9/11, which is such an honor to me. So I'd love to share that.
Yes, please do.
I'll share that now.
Sure.
Okay. A very sad day, the 11th of September. We will never forget. We will always remember. Sometimes things happen that are very wrong. We must work together and be strong. We ask, what led up to that day? Differences between people got in their way. We can help right this wrong, for even if we're different, we should know how to get along. Sometimes things happen that we don't understand. It's up to us to be accepting and lend each other a hand. We should all be more flexible and know how to bend to accept each human being on this earth as a friend. We can respect each other's differences, whatever they may be, make it fine to be you and fine to be me. As we look around our world at each individual face, we know together we can make our world a better place. And in listening to the news day after
I was
day,
just thinking that.
I get upset.
Oh.
So that's what motivated me to rhyme Peace in Our World. And so the book is basically this similar message as to the 9/11, that we're all human beings on this earth from the day of our birth. And that whole idea.
You just did a rhyme.
So, yes. So
I agree with you. I think our kids must be very confused because we teach this in school and then they go home and watch the news. And it's a little bit of a different story sometimes.
I really want them to know that it's not about our religion, culture, or race.